Most people abandon their container gardens by mid-July because they think pots mean endless watering schedules, constant fertilizing, and replanting everything when the season ends. But what if the problem was never the container itself? It was choosing plants that were never designed for pot life in the first place. There's a class of perennials so perfectly matched to container growing that once they're established, they essentially manage themselves. They handle missed waterings, they bounce back from neglect, they return stronger every single year without you ever touching a seed packet again, and right now they're being completely ignored in nurseries while everyone loads up their carts with annuals that'll be dead by September. 15 plants, 0 replanting, containers that deliver harvests year after year. Stay with me because plant number 11 is the one nobody expects to thrive in a pot. And plant number 15 will completely change how you think about what containers can actually handle long term. Drop your country in the comments right now and tell me, what are you currently growing in your containers? I want to see what this community is already working with before we dive into this list. And if you want more low-maintenance gardening strategies that actually work, subscribe and share this with anyone who's tired of replanting the same pots every spring. Here's the fundamental gap that almost every container gardening tutorial completely misses, and it's the reason most people end up frustrated and quit after one season. The entire container gardening industry is built around annuals. Petunias, begonias, zinnias, tomatoes, plants that deliver one spectacular season of color or harvest and then they're finished. You purchase them, you plant them, they perform beautifully, they die, and next spring you're back at the garden center starting from zero. This is a brilliant business model for nurseries. It is an exhausting, expensive model for you. What almost nobody explains, at least not with the specificity it deserves, is that a substantial number of perennials don't just survive in containers, they actually thrive in the controlled environment that a pot creates. They're less likely to become invasive, they're simpler to control, the drainage is superior to heavy clay garden soil, and because perennials channel their energy into building robust root systems, rather than rushing to produce maximum seed output in one season, they develop genuine resilience over time. A container perennial in its third year is exponentially more drought-resistant and self-reliant than it was when you first planted it. It's a compounding investment, not a seasonal expense that resets to zero every spring. The other critical point most tutorials ignore: not every perennial works in containers. Some require more root depth than any reasonable pot can provide. Others need soil chemistry or moisture levels that containers simply can't maintain consistently. The 15 perennials in this list have been specifically chosen because they're genuinely well-suited to the constraints of container life. Compact root systems, tolerance for limited soil volume, adaptability to fluctuating moisture levels, and the ability to handle occasional neglect. These aren't plants that merely survive in pots, despite the limitations. These are plants that are authentically matched to container conditions, and often perform better than they would in the ground. Let's get into the list. Plant number 1, lavender. We're starting with the perennial that container growing seems specifically designed for. Lavender originates from rocky, arid Mediterranean slopes, which means it evolved in precisely the conditions that containers naturally replicate. Excellent drainage, restricted soil volume, warm root zones, full sun exposure. This isn't a plant that merely tolerates container life. It genuinely performs better in a pot than it does in heavy, moisture-retentive garden soil, where poor drainage is the #1 killer of lavender. Here's the detail most videos completely skip about container lavender. Variety selection is absolutely everything. Hidcote and Munstead are your compact English varieties that stay dense and manageable. For fragrance intensity, French lavender like Grosso delivers maximum oil content. Once established, lavender in a container requires watering maybe once a week in peak summer, and even less as the root system matures. You get fragrance, you get harvest for sachets or cooking, you get pollinator activity, and the plant looks architectural even in winter. This is year-round value from a single pot. Plant number 2, Echinacea. If lavender is the fragrance plant, Echinacea is your drought insurance policy. This is the perennial for anyone who's ever forgotten to water for 5 days and panicked. Echinacea, commonly called coneflower, has a taproot system that drives deep even in containers, which means once it's established, it's accessing moisture reserves at the bottom of the pot that surface-rooted annuals never reach. What makes Echinacea exceptional in containers is that the restricted root space forces the plant to stay compact instead of sprawling like it does in garden beds. You get the same flower density, the same long bloom period from June through September, but in a tighter, more manageable form. The other advantage: spent flower heads provide winter interest and bird food. Goldfinches will work your Echinacea seed heads from October through February. Choose Powwow White or Cheyenne Spirit for compact growth and reliable repeat blooming. This plant delivers in year 1, but by year 3 it's essentially indestructible. Plant number 3, dwarf ornamental grasses. This is where most container gardeners completely miss an opportunity. Grasses in pots give you instant professional-level design structure, without any of the maintenance that perennial flowers demand. Dwarf fountain grass like Hamelin or blue fescue like Elijah Blue provide vertical architecture, movement, and texture contrast that makes everything else in your container display look more intentional. Here's the practical benefit. Grasses are working for you in 3 seasons: spring emergence, summer structure, fall color, and even winter silhouette if you don't cut them back. They handle heat, they handle drought, and because they're clumping rather than spreading, they stay exactly where you plant them. The root systems are fibrous and dense, which means they stabilize soil and prevent erosion in large containers. One clump of dwarf grass turns a simple pot into a designed landscape element, and your watering may be twice a week, even in peak summer. Plant number 4. Sedum. If you can kill sedum in a container, you're trying to kill it. This is the ultimate neglect-thriving perennial. Sedum stores water in its fleshy leaves, which means it's biologically engineered to handle drought conditions that would devastate most plants. Autumn Joy is the classic upright variety. It delivers pink flowers in late summer, when almost nothing else is blooming. Then the flower heads turn burgundy and hold structure through winter. For trailing varieties, Angelina sedum provides year-round golden foliage that spills over container edges. Here's what makes sedum genuinely exceptional: it improves with age. A sedum in year 1 looks fine. A sedum in year 5 looks like a mature specimen plant. The stems thicken, the flower density increases, and the drought tolerance becomes extreme. You can leave sedum unwatered for 2 weeks in July, and it won't even register stress. This is the plant you put in containers that sit in full sun, get forgotten, and still look better than anything you're actively maintaining. Plant number 5. Agapanthus. This is the plant that proves root constraint isn't a limitation. It's a performance strategy. Agapanthus, also called lily of the Nile, blooms exponentially better when its roots are crowded. In open garden soil, Agapanthus spreads and produces moderate flowering. In a container where the roots hit the wall and can't expand further, the plant channels all its energy into flower production. You get massive spherical blue or white flower clusters on tall stems, and the bloom intensity increases every single year as the root ball tightens. For cold climates, grow deciduous varieties like Stormcloud that tolerate freezing if you move the pot to a protected spot in winter. For warm climates, evergreen varieties like Queen Mum provide year-round foliage structure. Agapanthus wants full sun, sharp drainage, and surprisingly little water once established. This is one of the few perennials where you actively want to underpot it. Don't go bigger than necessary. The constraint is the entire point. Plant number 6. Heuchera. If you have shade, and you're struggling with drainage, Heuchera solves both problems simultaneously. Also called coral bells, Heuchera is native to rocky woodland slopes, which means it evolved for dappled light and fast-draining root zones, exactly what containers provide. The foliage is the main attraction: deep purple obsidian, lime green citronelle, silver sugarplum. You're growing this for year-round color, not just seasonal flowers. Here's the container advantage. Heuchera hates wet feet. In heavy garden soil with poor drainage, the crown rots. In a container with quality potting mix, drainage is automatic. You get consistent performance without the root rot issues that plague in-ground plantings. Heuchera also stays compact. Most varieties max out at 12 inches tall and wide, which makes them perfect for mixed container compositions or standalone pots in shaded entryways. Water when the top inch of soil is dry, and don't overdo it. This plant genuinely prefers slight neglect over constant attention. Plant number 7. Hardy geranium. This is not the annual geranium you see everywhere in garden centers. Hardy geranium, also called crane's bill, is a true perennial that blooms for 6 months straight and functions as the perfect spiller for container edges. Varieties like Roseanne deliver continuous blue flowers from May through October, which is a longer bloom period than almost any other perennial you can grow. The growth habit is spreading but controllable. It cascades over the rim of the container without becoming invasive. Here's what most people don't realize. Hardy geranium handles both sun and partial shade, which makes it adaptable to container locations that change throughout the day as shadows shift. It's also surprisingly drought tolerant once established, despite producing constant flowers. The trick is choosing compact varieties specifically bred for container growing. Roseanne is the industry standard, but Dillis and Tiny Monster stay even tighter. One plant provides texture, color, and movement for half the year. That's exceptional return on investment for a single perennial. Plant number 8. Kniphofia. This is the plant that lets you grow tropical-looking architecture in climates where tropical plants die. Kniphofia, commonly called red-hot poker, produces tall spikes of tubular orange, red, or yellow flowers that look like they belong in a desert botanical garden. But many varieties are fully cold hardy and actually perform better in containers than in open ground. Here's why. Kniphofia needs sharp drainage to survive winter. In heavy soil, the crown sits in moisture and rots during freeze-thaw cycles. In a container, drainage is immediate, and the crown stays dry. You get the dramatic vertical flower spikes, you get the architectural grass-like foliage, and you get pollinator activity from hummingbirds that can't resist the tubular blooms. Varieties like Mango Popsicle stay compact at 18 to 24 inches, which is perfect for container scale. Kniphofia handles heat, handles drought, and once established, it's one of the toughest perennials you can grow. The visual impact is completely disproportionate to the maintenance required. Plant number 9. Penstemon. This is the low-profile perennial that delivers drought tolerance without anyone realizing how tough it actually is. Penstemon, also called beard tongue, produces tubular flowers on upright stems and blooms for 6 to 8 weeks in early summer. The flowers attract hummingbirds, the foliage stays evergreen in mild climates, and the root system is deep enough that established plants can handle significant dry spells. What makes Penstemon exceptional in containers is that it doesn't sprawl. The growth habit is upright and clumping, which means it holds its space without crowding other plants if you're building a mixed container. Varieties like Husker Red provide burgundy foliage that contrasts beautifully with green or silver companion plants. Penstemon wants full sun and sharp drainage, two conditions that containers provide automatically. The maintenance requirement is minimal. Cut back spent flower stems to encourage repeat blooming, and that's it. This plant doesn't need division, doesn't need staking, doesn't need constant deadheading. It just performs. Plant number 10. Salvia nemorosa. If you're tired of replanting the same seasonal bedding plants every spring, Salvia nemorosa is your permanent replacement. This is the perennial that functions like an annual. It blooms heavily, it provides dense color, it fills space, but it comes back every single year without replanting. Varieties like Geranium deliver deep purple flower spikes from May through September, if you deadhead the first flush. Maynite is even more compact and works in smaller containers. The foliage is aromatic, which means deer and rabbits avoid it. The flowers attract pollinators, but not pests, and the root system is fibrous and shallow, which means Salvia nemorosa doesn't need deep containers or excessive root space. A 12-inch pot is sufficient for a mature plant. Here's the key detail. Salvia nemorosa tolerates heat and drought better than almost any other flowering perennial. In peak summer when most plants look stressed, Salvia is still producing flowers. This is the plant that makes your containers look maintained, even when you're not maintaining them. Plant number 11, Crocosmia. This is the surprise plant that most people assume is too aggressive for containers, but that's exactly why it works. Crocosmia spreads through underground corms and garden beds, often becoming invasive. But in a container, that spreading energy gets redirected into flower production. You get arching stems of brilliant orange or red flowers in midsummer, and the blooms are so reliable that Crocosmia is used in commercial landscaping, where performance has to be guaranteed. The sword-like foliage provides vertical structure, even when the plant isn't blooming, and the corms multiply within the container, which means your display gets denser and more impressive every year without any effort on your part. Varieties like Lucifer are the classic bright red, but Solfatare offers softer apricot tones with bronze foliage. Crocosmia handles full sun, tolerates heat, and once established, it's nearly impossible to kill. The container constrains what would be aggressive spreading in the ground, turning a potential garden thug into a perfectly controlled display plant. Plant number 12. Dianthus. If you want maximum fragrance per square inch of container space, Dianthus is the answer. Also called pinks, Dianthus produces clove-scented flowers on compact, mat-forming plants that stay under 12 inches tall. The fragrance is intense. One pot of Dianthus near a doorway or seating area delivers scent all summer. The foliage is blue-gray and evergreen, which means the plant looks intentional even when it's not flowering. And the drought tolerance is exceptional, because Dianthus evolved in Mediterranean and alpine conditions, where water is scarce. Varieties like Firewitch bloom repeatedly from May through September, if you shear back the spent flowers. Bath's Pink is even more compact, and spreads slowly to create a dense mat. Here's what makes Dianthus ideal for containers. It actually prefers lean soil. Rich, fertile potting mix makes Dianthus grow weak and floppy. In slightly neglected, well-draining container conditions, it stays compact, blooms heavily, and develops the intense fragrance it's known for. This is one of the rare perennials where less attention produces better results. Plant number 13. Achillea. Yarrow is the structural perennial that thrives on what most plants would consider drought stress. Achillea produces flat-topped flower clusters on tall stems, and the foliage is finely cut and aromatic. In a container, yarrow provides vertical interest without requiring staking or support. The flowers bloom for 6 to 8 weeks and hold their color even as they dry, which means you get extended ornamental value. But here's the real advantage. Achillea's root system is adapted to nutrient-poor, dry soils. In a container where moisture fluctuates and nutrients can be limited, yarrow doesn't just survive, it develops the tightest, most compact growth habit and the most intense flower color. Varieties like Moonshine provide soft yellow flowers and silver foliage. Paprika offers red flowers that fade to salmon, creating a multi-tone display. Achillea handles full sun, tolerates heat, and once established, it can go 10 days without water in peak summer. The controlled drought conditions of container life actually improve the plant's performance, rather than limiting it. Plant number 14. Veronica spicata. This is your thermal-tolerant vertical accent for containers that sit in full sun and get baked. Veronica spicata, commonly called spike speedwell, produces upright flower spikes in blue, pink, or white, and the bloom period extends from June through August if you deadhead. What makes Veronica exceptional in containers is that it handles heat without wilting or going dormant. Most perennials slow down or stop blooming when temperatures hit 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Veronica keeps performing. The foliage is low and mat forming, and the flower spikes rise vertically to 12 to 18 inches, which creates dimensional contrast in mixed containers. Varieties like Royal Candles stay compact and bloom reliably. Red Fox offers pink flowers that don't fade in intense sun. Veronica wants full sun and moderate water, not constant moisture, but regular drinks during dry spells. In a container with quality drainage, this is easy to manage. The plant doesn't spread aggressively, doesn't need division, and doesn't require winter protection in most climates. It's genuinely low-maintenance vertical structure that performs in conditions where most flowering perennials struggle. Plant number 15. Liriope. This is the final solution for containers in the harshest spots. Deep shade, neglect, inconsistent watering, temperature extremes. Liriope, commonly called lily turf, is the perennial that survives conditions that kill everything else. The grass-like foliage stays evergreen year-round, and in late summer, the plant produces purple or white flower spikes that are subtle but consistent. But you're not growing Liriope for flowers. You're growing it because it's indestructible. It handles full shade. It handles full sun. It tolerates drought. It tolerates wet soil. It survives in containers that freeze solid in winter. Varieties like Big Blue provide wider foliage that creates more visual mass. Silver Dragon offers variegated white and green leaves that brighten shaded areas. Here's why Liriope is number 15. It changes how you think about where containers can go. You've been avoiding that shaded corner because nothing survives there. You've been skipping that baking hot patio because plants fry. Liriope goes in those spots and performs anyway. It's not spectacular. It's not dramatic. But it's permanent, reliable, and completely unbothered by conditions that defeat other plants. That's the ultimate container perennial, one that expands what's possible rather than limiting where you can garden. This is the shift. Stop planting for one season and start planting for years. Every single perennial in this list returns without replanting, improves with age rather than declining, and handles neglect better than it handles constant attention. That's the opposite of the annual model. You're not spending every spring at the garden center, replacing what died. You're not watering twice a day to keep temporary plants alive. You're building permanent displays that compound value over time instead of resetting to zero every season. If you found even 2 or 3 plants in this list that work for your climate and your container setup, you've just eliminated hours of seasonal maintenance. If you apply this approach to all your pots, you've fundamentally changed what container gardening costs you in time, money, and energy. Drop a comment and tell me which plant you're trying first. And if you want more strategies for gardening that fits real life instead of ideal conditions, subscribe now. Share this with anyone who's tired of replanting the same containers every year. Let's build permanent gardens, not seasonal projects.